the thing about green finance is that, well, it's finance, which is incredibly abstract and rather difficult to visualize. And yet it has this incredible power over the world that we live in. People use the concept of financialization now in the social sciences to try to capture its importance over pretty much every aspect of our lives. And it contributes also to, well, it's fundamental part of globalization, it's part of international development. And now with the ecological crisis and climate change and so on, finance is also taking on an important role in this area, which of course has extremely concrete consequences in, let's say, the real world. And I thought even before beginning my project, it would be great to try to use visual arts somehow to try to both to express and also to think through and develop some of our understanding of how this all works. So I was already familiar with Fiametta's work from what she did for my wife, actually, and colleague in another project before RIVA was created. And so I asked her to help, and she was absolutely fantastic. Gave me a selection of artists. We worked on a logo with one artist, which maybe someone can share. I don't want to hold things up by trying to find it, but might be a little bit awkward for me to share it. Maybe, okay, this is not the logo, of course. This is something else that the same artist did to focus on one work package, one case study, which if I hand over now to Giulia, she can tell you a little bit about.
Thank you very much, Marc. Giulia, let's move over.
Yes, so, well, first I'm really glad to be here and to really be part of this event that represents an exciting encounter between academia and illustration. And as part of Marc's project, my research has explored the first Chinese green bond to be issued, certified, and listed in Europe. And so the anthropological and ethnographic approach which characterizes the project allow me to explore how this financial instrument came to life, which actors were involved, what kind of political and economic context there was beyond it, but also and importantly, I could investigate where the proceeds of this bond, so the proceeds that were coming out of this bond were invested, which then led me to conduct fieldwork research in Portugal. And when Marc first introduced me to the idea that we could collaborate with RIVA and Fiametta on this case study, I thought how, in a way, challenge would have been to translate something as abstract as finance into a comic, right? Because particularly when doing research of finance, that as I did in the past, one of the main challenges that we face, as we were saying before, is to really to give shape to something that is very abstract, as it is value, as it is money. So not just how it circulates, how it multiplies, but you have to also take into account we are dealing with something which work as universal equivalent, as mean of exchange, as a store of value, and so as the power to really abstract things and fictionalize things. And so, and precisely because of this characteristic, in a way, finance has always had a kind of a particular power, right, politically and socially beyond the economic domain, which is one of the main also purpose of the project. And so so that as my case study started taking shape, I began tracing and following kind of the different steps, the life cycle of this financial instrument. And when I started talking with Fiammetta, I was in the middle of my fieldwork in Portugal, like analyzing how the proceeds of the bond had been invested to build some wind farms. So renewable infrastructures. I was talking with local community, asking people living nearby this infrastructure what they thought about them, if they were happy or not to have this turbine. And so that all of these controversies started emerging, which you can see from the different phases of the comics. You know, at the beginning, really, there is like the anthropologist that goes into the field and realize how many actors are involved, and then, you know, the investors coming in, and then, you know, when you start talking about the people, with the people and the community about what is beyond all of these financial instruments, you realize what its impact on the ground. And so, yeah, it was great to have Fiammetta as interlocutor, because it really helped me to focus more, to stimulate, I guess, a more analytical approach, right? To connect all the dots of the story, in fact, and the research process. And I guess, I mean, beyond all of that, this experience is really valuable and precious, because it really helped to kind of break the specialized knowledge boundary that characterize finance and prevent outsider to understand what it is. And so maybe then Aneil can mention something about these case studies as well.
Wonderful, yeah. Thank you, Giulia. Yeah. Would you like to take over from there?
Definitely. Thanks, Alison, Marc, and
hi.
Giulia.
Hi.
Yeah, so as Marc and Giulia have been describing, you know, as anthropologists are trying to make sense of this kind of complexity of both climate change and finance and all of these products. And so I'm very excited, you know, also kind of increasingly excited hearing everyone's projects and their illustrations in all these different formats and forms of knowledge, because I'm actually about to start an illustration for my work with Matteo, which you mentioned earlier.
Who was on the first panel, exactly, yes.
Exactly, yeah, so, you know, I think doing these illustrations, for the reasons that Marc and Giulia and so many of us today have mentioned, are incredibly useful in terms of bridging, you know, the very different scales and contexts in which our work is connected to. So both connecting those in an illustration and also allowing us to have this image, this illustration that we can share with the very different actors and folks in the spaces that we're studying, and also to those that we're trying to teach, right? So I imagine us at Impact HAU using our illustrations both in classrooms as well with finance practitioners, policymakers, and in all of these different contexts. And particularly for me, I'm excited on working with on this illustration with Matteo, because it's going to really help me connect my earlier PhD research in climate finance, where I was hanging out in London in financial markets, in all these kind of white collar events and conferences, trying to make sense of this world of climate finance and trying to break it down into particular components for my field work. And so really trying to connect this world now to my work at Impact HAU and doing a deep dive into the kind of financialization and production of financial products for oceans. So for the kind of production of this blue economy, supposedly to deal with environmental and climate issues related to oceans and water management. And I'm particularly focused on a project in the Seychelles. So I'm hoping to use the illustration with Matteo to connect all of these white collar events in New York, in London, with the work being done by the government of the Seychelles to promote this idea of the blue economy and then with the livelihoods and experiences of people on beaches and in the actual material physical spaces on those islands. And so I think the illustration will be incredibly useful to make these connections. And it's also interesting to see the different types of comics and illustrations that exist already within this blue economy space. So for example, here you can see The Economist did an online conference on this idea of the Ocean Summit, right? So you can see in this illustration they did out of that event all these ideas they already have about how the oceans exist and how it exists in financial terms. And so I'm hoping in the illustration with Matteo to really highlight how these kind of forms of understanding the world are produced, and also where the disconnections are that allow for this type of knowledge to then have power in the world in projects such as the Blue Bonds project in the Seychelles. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Aneil. It's showing again how we're bridging those gaps between the different, be that green economy, the blue economy. So much and so many exciting things happen